All right, folks, we'll give this a shot, given that Zoom doesn't want to cooperate today. We'll go through a module here on sleep. So go through, I prefer this less than doing it live, but we'll make the best of it. As you were going through, if you have any questions on any of this material, make sure to go through, get in touch with me, and I'll make sure that you're squared away on stuff. So, going to talk about sleep, basic functions here. Going back to the previous, our previous slide on brain structures, wanted to think about just to do a quick overview on some of the neurological structures that are involved in regulating, maintaining sleep. Basic structures, and again, we touched on this in the last lecture. The pons in the hindbrain, the reticular formation in the midbrain, and then the thalamus, hypothalamus, and preoptic areas of your forebrain. So again, we've got structures that are involved in sleep that are spread out all over your brain. And again, speaking to this kind of principle that we had talked about last time, that is very rare that we're going to find one specific section of your brain that does all the work on some type of psychological function. It's generally spread on out. This just increases the complexity and the ability to be adaptive, and also if you're have some sort of damage or things like that, some possibilities to work around. So these are general brain areas that are involved. In terms of neurotransmitters, again, this is complex. A number of different neurotransmitters are going to be involved in sort of managing sleep-wake cycles, things along these lines. So you've got acetylcholine, right? We talked about that as being involved in muscle movement, but also involved in sleep. Norepinephrine, serotonin, histamine, hypocretin, or orexin. These are all neurotransmitters that are involved. So just kind of know generally about some of these areas, and that they're involved in some way with sleep. You don't have to worry about what specifically each of these things do. Okay, so this is our neurological substrates, so sort of our physiology in terms of brain structures that are that we have found to be at least involved in some way with managing your sleep. Other thing we want to think about in terms of understanding how our sleep-wake cycles work is this idea of circadian rhythms. Okay, plants, animals regulated by a variety of different types of circadian rhythms. If I'm talking about a circadian rhythm, it's just a daily rhythmical change in behavior or some other aspect of physiology that's kind of going over and over again on kind of a daily cycle. So sleep, one of the most prominent circadian rhythms for humans. Human sleep-wake cycle is about a 24-hour a day cycle going through. It's not exactly. A lot of this, as we'll talk about in a moment, is depending on external stimuli to go through and wake and reset this clock, but sort of roughly about a 24-hour day. And this timing of the sleep-wake cycle, the circadian rhythm managed by a structure in your brain called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, or the SCN. Okay, this is located in your hypothalamus, and this is a bundle of nerves that goes through and controls this sleep-wake cycle. So if we were to go through and lesion that, if we were to knock that out, we would see problems with regulating sleep-wake cycle. Your sleep rhythms would be thrown all out of whack. Okay. So thinking about your daily rhythm, and sleep's not the only circadian rhythm we know occurs in plants and animals. You'll see videos of, for anybody who's a biology, botany person, you have leaves and flowers and things like that in plants that open up during the day and close down during the evenings. Same type of thing. So sleep isn't the only circadian rhythm, but it's the one that is probably most prominent for humans, at least that we sort of see and sort of very obvious. Another thing we need to be thinking about is something we known as a Zeitgeber. I've been criticized on my German. I don't speak German, but if we're thinking about Zeitgebers in terms of our sleep or our circadian rhythms, this is going to be some type of stimulus that resets our biological clocks that go through and manage that waxing and waning cycle. Okay. And so For mammals, external light serves as our primary Zeitgeber for our sleep-wake cycles. Okay, what happens is when we get light that enters through special receptors in our eye, special photoreceptors, so not the lights and the cones and things along those lines, right? If it was just rods and cones and things that were managing our sleep-wake, if I have my eyes closed and there's not a lot of light getting in, that would kind of throw things off. So we've got special receptors in the eye that take light information and sends that to the hypothalamus, back to our suprachiasmatic nucleus, and resets this our sleep-wake cycle, this circadian rhythm that we have for sleep. So light is our Zeitgeber. That's the signal that helps manage this. And what we see through experiments with animals and then also observing some conditions in humans, if we go through, we can actually play around with your circadian rhythm by fooling around with this Zeitgeber. So let's say if I have, and there's been research doing this, if I have a group of, let's say, rats, and I keep them in a dimly lit enclosure. So it's not super bright, it's not super dark, it's just kind of generally dim. And so what we were doing with that, if these rats are kept in this enclosure with just kind of a steady light, it fools with the natural circadian rhythms because everything's the same. So you're not getting fluctuations in light. But in those animals, if we go through like soon after what in the outside world would be dusk, so getting late into the evening, if we go through and we flash a bright light on those rats, what that will do is that will reset that circadian rhythm. That Zeitgeber will set it back so that in the animal's body, the animal's body's going to set that back so that it's towards like the morning, like a sleep-wake cycle. That flash of light, if we present it right at dusk, is going to cause that animal so the animal's system to act or think as though it's early morning. However, if we take this rat, again, it's dimly lit, right? It's sort of constant light all the time. But if we give it a flash of light late at night, let's say like 1, 2 in the morning, what it's going to do is it's going to skip that circadian rhythm forward because it's taking that light information as like, oh, it's morning. And so now we're going to kick this signal up again. Okay. So we can fool around with this, and we also see this in human beings. If in our history, when we didn't have electric lights, when we were sort of working by candles and fireplace and things like that, the idea is like that we probably often went to bed much earlier than we did with electric lights because that light kind of helps sort of or fools around with our natural rhythms. This is also why, for people who are struggling with sleep difficulties, one of the things people will say is make sure that you're sort of dimly lit, sort of when it's time to go to bed, you're not having bright flashes of light. The idea is that that can start to fool with some of these circadian rhythms. Okay, so for humans, that morning light is our Zeitgeber. So when your eyes are closed, you're laying there, special photoreceptors in the eye coming through, sending that information back to the hypothalamus, to your suprachiasmatic nucleus, and going through and resetting that clock. Setting the clock to say, hey, it's time to wake up. Your body starts to get activated, things coming up, and so that you can stay on rhythm with things. Okay. All right. Stages of sleep. Now, what we know, and so where we've gone through and studied this, is from research that's looked at electrocortical activity. So this is your ECG function. So if you sort of think about where you see pictures or movies or things like that where people have the caps on with lots and lots of electrodes coming off the top of their head, this is the assessment of ECG. And what ECG is doing is it's measuring electrical activity from your brain on the surface of your scalp. Okay, so you've got a bunch of little electrodes here, and what those electrodes are doing are measuring electrical waveforms that are coming off the top of your brain, kind of going through your skull and sort of being recorded with very, very sensitive equipment on the surface of your scalp. And so this is generally how we go through and define what stages of sleep or what sleep looks like is through differences in the waveforms we're seeing based on these these EEG, not ECG, that's electrocardiogram, that's a different thing. EEG is going to be the recording of electricity on the scalp. Okay, so we've got the EEG system set up. And this is helpful because otherwise, if we're just watching people, it's hard to know kind of where they're at. Sometimes we can tell, but sometimes someone could be kind of asleep and we wouldn't know it necessarily. But with these EEG measurements, what we can do is start to pick out different types of waveforms that start to mark different levels of sleep and wakefulness. Okay, if we're thinking about hopefully you right now, right? You're awake, you're alert, you're listening to this recording. If we were to record an EEG waveform off the top of your scalp right now, what we would see is a waveform or electrical activity marked by what we would call beta activity. Okay, with our beta activity, these are irregular, sort of not super symmetrical. So these are irregular, very fast, kind of short, jagged waves going on that are consistent with alert wakefulness. Again, it's marked by desynchrony. Desynchrony means that unlike our alpha levels that we'll get to in a moment, you see how this is kind of smooth and kind of even and kind of symmetrical, kind of bigger. Beta wave's not like that. It looks like just a tiny scribble that's not sort of systematic necessarily. It's just kind of going up and down here. This irregular waveform, this low amplitude waveform, this is going to be consistent with your beta activity. Means you're awake, means you're alert, means that you're just kind of paying attention here. Okay. Also, though, you can be awake, but if we start to do certain things, we can start to see that waveform change. Okay. If I ask you, all right, do this right now. All right, I want you to sit back. I want you to close your eyes. You doing this? Okay. Sit back. Or close your eyes. Get relaxed in your chair, wherever you're sitting. I want you to close your eyes and just focus on your breathing. Breathe in. Breathe out. Eyes closed. And just focus on your breathing. Inhale. And exhale. For the thoughts come into your mind, just let those go. Notice them. Let them go. Redirect your attention to your breathing as you breathe in and you breathe out and you relax. All right. If you were doing that and I was measuring an EEG, and if I had an EEG attached and was measuring this from your head, as you close your eyes and you relax, what we would see is probably see that waveform change from this beta activity that's very sharp and rapid into something that would switch over into alpha activity. Alpha activity is your cortical waveform that's associated with wakeful relaxation. So what we would see is that electrical activity going from this desynchronous low amplitude irregular pattern to something that starts to get a little bit bigger waves and definitely more systematic. Okay, so again, alert wakefulness, stuff you're doing hopefully day to day, sort of paying attention, going about your business, going to be beta. But as you slow down, particularly as you close your eyes, relax, breathe, you're just resting, you're still awake, not asleep, but we start to see it transition into this alpha waveform. All right, but let's say it's the end of the day, you're getting ready, going to shut down, okay? As you start to fall asleep, the way we start to identify sleep, again, is noticing changes in this EEG waveform. Here, sectioning things up into different stages, which is an older way to think about this. This is fine. We'll just do this here. Your book talks about like deep sleep and REM sleep and things along those lines. Don't worry about that. For the purposes of lecture stuff, go through and we'll just go through, talk about traditional stage 1, stage 2 types of sleep. And the newer stuff is just kind of an amalgamation here. But the principles are still the same. Okay. What we see as you start to transition from sleep to wakefulness, what we'll see is, again, a shift from alpha activity to theta activity. Okay, theta activity, things start to, you can't really see it real well here, but things start to slow down even more. This waveform starts to get larger and larger than your alpha activity that we saw before. We'll get to a slide that kind of pulls all this stuff together. But basically, this waveform starts to slow down. Okay, and so this is when you're kind of making that change from relaxed wakefulness to sleep. What we see is theta activity, and if we were watching you sort of sitting there, what we would see, your eyelids might start to open and close. Your eyes might start to roll around, right? Like we've been here, we've seen other people in this stage. You're struggling, right? You're trying to like sort of maybe sort of heads nodding around and things like that. Your eyes kind of roll down. So this is what's going on in stage 1 sleep. So that's what's looking at behaviorally. But in your brain, what we're seeing is this switch from alpha activity over to theta activity. Okay? If we keep going in about 10 minutes in, and again, this is on average-ish, sleep-wake cycles vary across individuals, so don't get too caught up on sort of exactly when this is going on. But when we, about 10 minutes in on average, what we'll do is we'll hit stage 2. We can think about this as early sleep, okay? And what we start to see is this irregular theta activity, right? So it's kind of going, that was marking stage 1. What we will start to see in that waveform, a couple of different features. Sleep spindles and K complexes. So here's a sleep spindle. You're kind of going out. Waves are getting bigger and kind of more regular in that theta. And then all of a sudden you get a jagged, sort of very fast and sort of rapid. And then you kind of slip back into this traditional theta activity. Okay, this is a sleep spindle. K complexes, kind of a big jolt, right? So going, we got theta, 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 bam. Big K complex. When we start to see in that theta wave, when we start to see the emergence of K complexes and sleep spindles, this is what we would, how we would identify that you've or someone is transitioned into stage 2 sleep. Stage 3 sleep. This is about 25 minutes in on average. What we see is a shift from theta over into delta activity. Okay. This is that deep restorative sleep, and what we see in your EEG is we start to see big waves. All right, things are getting slow, things are getting big. In stage 3 sleep, about 25 minutes in, we start to see about 20 to 50% of your EEG is made up of this delta activity. And then when we get into stage 4 sleep, again, sort of a deeper slow wave sleep, what we're seeing is over 50% or over half of your EEG is marked by this delta activity. Okay, so these are the big waves here, going from something that was a little shorter and this slow, high amplitude delta wave activity. Okay, and now when you're into stage 4 sleep, this is where we're starting to see more common certain types of activities during deep sleep, only woken by strong stimulus. Okay, if something comes up and we'll go through and someone like shakes you, or your house falls in or something like that, that will wake people out of deep sleep, but more difficult to get people out of that deep sleep than it is from some of those earlier ages of sleep. And what we often see here in stage 4 sleep, sleepwalking, bedwetting, night terrors, things along those lines. So if you or someone you know is known for sleepwalking, this is generally the stage of sleep at which that occurs. Okay, so again, your slow wave sleep, stage 3 and 4, it's always both stages are marked by this really big delta wave activity. It's just how much of your overall EEG is made up of these delta waves. All right, so we've gone from stage 1 to stage 2. Stage 3, stage 4, we're in this slow wave rapid sleep. And then what we see about 90 minutes in, again, this is a rough approximation, what we see is a shift back up to this combination of desynchronized theta and beta activity. Remember, desynchronized just means irregular. What we were doing is we've gone from stage 4 sleep, where you got these big slow waves, all of a sudden to an EEG waveform that looks a lot like a mix between early stage sleep and wakefulness. Okay, so theta and beta activity kind of mixed together. What we'll see in REM sleep, eye movements. So your eyes will start to move around. If we've got sensors and to notice to monitor eye movement, we'll see eye movement move around. Also see muscle paralysis. Okay, when you kick into REM sleep, your body shuts down all your muscles, so you can't move around. Okay, often dreaming, not exclusively, but dreaming often associated with REM sleep. And if your body is up and active and things along those lines, what you might see is people starting to act out or thrash around or do things that are consistent with their dreams. And so what happens during REM sleep is that your body shuts your muscles down, basically paralyzes you so that you can't get up and run around. Okay, and what we see is examples where this starts to go wrong can start to be problematic in a couple of different ways. If anybody has heard stand-up by a comedian named Mike Birbiglia, it's fantastic. He's super good. He's an actor. He's been in some stuff. But Mike Birbiglia has a condition called REM sleep disorder. And what happens with Birbiglia is his body doesn't paralyze his muscles when he's in REM sleep. And so he'll tell stories about going through and acting out and doing things. He's unconscious. He's in REM sleep. He's dreaming, but actively going out and acting things out, which seems fun and kind of hilarious, and some aspects of it is. But it's not if you're jumping out of windows or sort of thrashing around, putting yourself or other people in danger. So we see for some individuals this failure of the body to paralyze muscles problematic during REM sleep. On the other hand, we see some people who will report waking up out of REM sleep, but your body hasn't unparalyzed you. And so now all of a sudden, terrifying, I'm awake, I'm alert, but my body's paralyzed, I can't move. Again, something that's sort of very, very scary. So again, generally for most people, if the system's working well, muscles paralyzed, your body's paralyzed during REM sleep, so you're not up and running around. Also, we see sort of general activation, things along those lines, specifically occurring mostly during REM sleep. Okay, some dreaming that's going on, and what we see different than deep sleep is people start to become responsive to meaningful stimuli. Okay, so if I'm in REM sleep and I'm just kind of crashed out or sort of whatever, and maybe there's sort of TV going on in the background, fine, doesn't bother me, right? But if someone were to maybe call my name, right? Or if I'm a parent and I hear my child crying or something along those lines, right? That stuff will wake me up out of REM sleep, which is interesting because it suggests that the brain is processing and gating out relevant, irrelevant stimulation. So if I live in a city near a highway or near a street, cars moving by, sirens, stuff like that, maybe I sleep all the way through it. But my child cries and I'm up and awake during REM sleep. And if we wake you up out of REM sleep, it's likely that you might feel more alert, attentive, if we wake you during sort of this episode of sort of desynchronous theta beta activity. If I wake you up out of delta sleep, you're not going to like it. You're going to be slow. You're going to be sluggish. You're going to be more likely to sort of have a hard time sort of getting the engine running. But if we wake you up out of REM sleep, again, likely to feel alert, attentive with this. Okay. So again, this is about 90 minutes in terms of a sleep-wake cycle. If we go through and take a look at and again, remember that this is sort of on the average human that doesn't sort of really exist. In general, what we typically see is 4 to 5 periods of REM a night, right? So we can see up here, this is kind of does a better job of, here's my relaxed wakefulness, here's my alpha waves, right? And so they're kind of big, large amplitude waves. They're pretty regular, but they're still sort of occurring at a higher frequency. So they're occurring faster than when we slip into stage 1. Okay, stage 1, we start to see these theta waves. Theta waves start to get bigger and sort of farther apart, and then we go maybe transition back into some alpha or beta stuff here, and then we're back into theta. Okay, we get into stage 2, we've got more theta activity. Here's our sleep spindles, back to theta, theta, theta. Here's my K complex. Stage 3 and 4, we're down into these deep delta waves, these big slow waves here, and then dropping into REM sleep. Now we see a combination of theta activity, beta, which is associated with alert wakefulness, and things are getting desynchronous much faster. And basically your brain looks kind of like you're awake, even though you're sleeping. Okay. What we see in the typical cycle, we see our frequency of slow wave sleep drops as we continue on through the night. So the majority, most of your deep wave sleep, and this is that deep restorative sleep, going on in the first half of the evening. Okay. If we go through and kind of look again, and this is just a general sort of what things might look like in terms of stages. Here I'm going from awake, and then down stage 1, 2, 3, 4, spend some time down here in stage 4 sleep, and then come back up. And now we're in REM sleep for a bit, and then we drop back down into slow wave sleep, back up, we're REM, drop down here, stage 2, REM, stage 2, sort of maybe awake, sort of go back, sort of REM. So we start to see deep sleep occurring early in the evening, later stages of sleep, more REM activity, which starts to make sense, right? As we sort of late in the evening, you want to be down, you want to be, or early in the evening, you want to be down, you want to be getting that deep restful sleep. No reason to wake up anytime soon at the early stages of sleep. But as we start to progress closer and closer and closer towards daytime, when we're going to start to wake up, spending more time in REM sleep, easier to pop out of this. Again, it's pretty miserable. Now, there's individual differences. Some people never like to be waking up out of sleep. Some people do a little bit better of it. Some people are pop right out of bed and get going. Some of us takes us a little bit longer, but we tend to see more REM sleep occurring later in the evening or later in the cycle versus deep sleep occurring in the beginning. Okay. Another question people often have, Beck, do we have to, so if I wake up, do I have to go all the way back up through and all the way back down? Not necessarily. With research, we'll see this. It's known as REM rebound. If I have an EEG attached to you and we're doing a sleep study and you're sleeping, and the moment I see that you start to drop down into REM sleep, I wake you up. Okay. And so I shake you, make sure that you're awake. If I do that for too long, what your body will start to do is drop right back down into REM sleep immediately. And so it's not this, we don't start from square one where we now have to take the time to go down, down, down. If we start to disrupt this, we'll see jumping around in terms of your sleep-wake cycle. All right. So sleep, this is something that's universal in vertebrates. So if you're an animal and you have a backbone, you sleep, at least at some level. Okay. So if we see something that's universal in an organism or specific types of organisms, it must mean that it's probably doing something for us, right? Tricky thing is we don't know exactly 100% what exactly sleep does. We have ideas, right? We have a lot of theories. And we know that if we go through and we disrupt sleep, it causes problems, right? So based on our research, we sort of hypotheses and things that we think sleep is involved in is just general adaptation, feeling restored when we work in the morning, some memory consolidation, creativity, looks like some impact on sort of the physical growth for certain types of things. We have the most evidence, though, in terms of if we start to deprive people of sleep, what we know for sure is that it starts to impact it seems to be important for our basic cognitive capacity. Cognitive, remember, is just a fancy psychology word for thinking, right? Your ability to go through and sort of maintain, pay attention, sort of think and sort of fire on all cylinders in terms of sort of day-to-day stuff is maintained a lot by sleep, okay? What we see, and think about this, if any of you out there are in, say, armed forces or former military, something like that, right? So let's say you're at boot camp, right? Very little sleep, right? So you go to bed, you get up early, so you're out running. You can do physical activity isn't impacted a whole lot by sleep. Your body will keep going, right? But what we see, particularly if we're being deprived of slow wave sleep, is before too long impacts on your ability to attend, to focus, to think through things, to be quick. Okay. This is why for certain types of professions like air traffic control and things like that, making sure that people, truck drivers, things along those lines, where there are regulations to try and make sure that these people are getting enough sleep. Because if I deprive you, particularly of slow wave sleep, what'll start to happen is you're not attending, you're not focused, it's hard to concentrate, you're not thinking necessarily clearly, things get fuzzy. This is why when you see tips for doing well on exams and things like that, it almost always involves making sure that you get a good night's sleep, because it's going to make sure that you're sharp. Okay. We also have a good amount of evidence that sleep is important for brain development in children and learning in adults. And this, if we're thinking about just general cognitive capacity being associated with slow wave sleep, it looks like REM sleep starts to become important for aspects of brain development and learning. Children spend a much greater proportion of their night in REM sleep. Okay, which suggests that developmentally this could be important. In adults, if we start to go through and deprive people of REM, what we start to see is problems with consolidating memory and sort of going through and retaining learned information. Again, why it's always important to go through and get a good night's sleep before you go through with an exam. What it looks like in adults is something about REM sleep goes through and helps us consolidate memories, sort of keep things, store things in their right place, so that we can go through and access those things later on when we want. Okay, so still, we would think that sleep is such a huge portion, like we spend a large portion of our lives doing this, that we would have a much better handle on why we sleep and what functions it happens. But again, this is an area where we're still learning quite a bit. All right, went through that pretty quick, but let me know if you have any questions. Do make sure to go through and take a look at the lecture summary, comprehension check slides, and if anything comes up, make sure to let me know. Again, apologies. I'm not sure exactly what's going on with my internet. It just decided to be no good today. Hopefully we'll get this figured out so we're back on track on Friday. Okay, so make sure that you're get your pre-screener done. Make sure that you're getting an early start on research stuff if there are studies available. Otherwise, let me know if you have questions, and we'll see you all on Friday. All right, thanks.